Hi, I'm Rob Clementi from Television Education Network, and I'm talking to Linda Tapiolas from Cooper Grace Ward in Brisbane. Recently, Linda presented a paper at our Business and Property Tax Conference on the Gold Coast, and her subject was getting up to speed with the additional small business CGT conditions for shares and trust interests. Linda, can you provide us now with a brief summary of the rules which apply to CGT events happening to shares and units on or after the 8th of February 2018?
Of course, there's 4 rules that taxpayers have to consider for CGT events in relation to shares or units which occur on or after the 8th of February 2018. In summary, the first one is that the taxpayer who has the CGT event in relation to their shares or units needs to either satisfy the $6 million net asset test or be a CGT small business entity. Now, that rule was in place prior to the 8th of February 2018. The change from that date onwards, though, is that if the taxpayer is trying to rely on the CGT small business entity condition, it will need to carry on the business prior to the CGT event, whereas before you just had to be a CGT small business entity during the year. So this new rule is it has to be carrying on the business prior to the CGT event. The second rule is that the shares need to be, or shares or units need to be active for at least half the time that the shareholder or unit holder has held those interests. Again, that rule was in place prior to the 8th of February 2018. The change now relates to situations where those companies or unit trusts in which the shares or units are being sold actually own shares or units in other entities. Now the rule requires that the entity in which the shares or units are being sold, which is called the object entity, that is considered to actually hold all the assets of those later entities. And how it works is you look at the gross assets of those later entities multiplied by whatever percentage of shares or units that the object holds in those later entities, and that percentage of gross assets are taken to be the object entity's assets. So again, we're looking at the object entity. 80% of its assets active for half the time that the shareholder or unit holder has held those shares or units. The further issue is that if it's an active asset of the later entity, it will be an active asset of the object entity, provided that at the time that we're testing, which is basically for half the time, that the later entity satisfies either the $6 million net asset test or is a CGT small business entity test, and that the shareholder or unit holder has a small business participation percentage in that later entity of at least 20%. The third requirement is that the object entity, so that's the one that the event occurs, the one that we're holding the shares or units in, to which the event occurs, it's got to satisfy the $6 million net asset test or be a CGT small business entity. So this is a new rule that applies to events after 8th of February 2018. And the big kicker on this one is that it also needs to take into account the net assets of entities which it holds at least a 20% interest in. So once it's got that 20% interest, it needs to include 100% of the net assets of those later entities. And the final rule, no change to this, it was here prior to 8th of February 2018, is a CGT concession stakeholder test. So that is, you need to have a significant individual, that's the shareholder, or their spouse, who's an individual, provided that they have a small business participation percentage of greater than 0, or if the shareholder is not an individual, then you've got to trace through to CGT small business, you've got to trace through to CGT concession stakeholders in the object entity that have at least a 90% interest in the shareholder. So thank you very much. That's the 4 rules that apply for CGT events occurring in relation to shares and units after the 8th of February 2018.
Linda, thank you very much. That was a very helpful summary. If you're interested in hearing more on Linda talking about this particular issue, you can do it by looking for some of Linda's presentations on our website, which are available in recorded webinars. And it also may be soon that we also have a video webinar series based on the Business and Property Tax Conference, which will include Linda's presentation.